Okay, Dad. Slightly good news on one hand, really bad news on the other. The latest data from Black Book shows used car values on the wholesale market are falling, the most they've fallen in 4 months. That's the good news. The bad
Yes.
news, Cox Automotive just shared their latest data for average transaction prices for new vehicles, and we have hit a milestone that I don't think either of us ever thought was possible. The average transaction price last month in June was over $48,000, $48,043, excuse me, to be exact, for the average new car last month. Let's explain to everyone what's going on in the new and used car market. How's that sound?
It makes sense to me that we should try our best to explain it.
Good news first or bad news first?
Let's start with the good news.
All right, Pops, walk us through it. What's happening over on the used car market?
Well, at the used car auctions, used car values on the wholesale level have dropped the most that they've dropped week over week. That they've dropped in the last 4 months. And it's a pretty significant market adjustment. We're at more than a third of a point drop from the same week a year ago. And most of that was driven by the truck segment. Trucks obviously are not quite as fuel efficient as cars, so they have been dropping more consistently over the last several weeks. But this was the biggest drop that we've seen in the truck market, and this was also the first week where we saw on the vehicle side,
The car segment.
segment, that every category of cars dropped last week. And we haven't seen that before. When near luxury and luxury cars were dropping in the past, your subcompact and compact cars were actually still appreciating. But this is the first week where we've seen it across the board in every segment of cars that there was a drop in wholesale values. Now, the good news is that we've seen this drop. The bad news is that it normally takes about 6 to 8 weeks before we see that reflected in used car asking prices. So we should hope over the next 6 to 8 weeks to see the used car asking prices go down at the retail level at the dealerships where the cars are.
And also add into the mix all the conversation we've been having around potential increase in repo vehicles, increase in used car availability. Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks from now, this market should look very different. However, for the first time in 4 months, we're seeing significant weakening in the used car wholesale market. Eventually,
Yes.
that'll translate over into the retail market. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, Dad, new cars, the story there, unfortunately, is still the same. And quite frankly, it's worse
Yes.
than it was even last month. Inventory levels have been between 1 and 1.1 million new cars in inventory, supposedly. That comes from Cox Automotive as well. You don't have to look too far to know that there's not 1 to 1.1 million new cars in inventory. Traditionally, 3 years ago, there were 4 million cars in inventory, new cars in inventory. Go drive down your local automobile row. There's not 1/4 or 3/4 as many cars. There's probably 9/10 as many cars. There's 1 out of 10.
Yes.
The decline in new car inventory is much more severe. Pops, we have set a new record on average transaction price for new vehicles, $48,043. The previous high was $47,202. That was in December of last year. Prices are up year over year from last June to this June, over $5,400, a 12.7% increase in new car average transaction prices. Which part of the data from the Cox report stood out most to you?
The average transaction price, it just scares the hell out of me, because the average transaction price is more than the average person can afford. So it seems to me that as the transaction prices continue to escalate, that you have a smaller group of potential customers that ultimately you'll be able to sell to. So the market will get smaller. The vehicles that the average person can afford are not new cars anymore. And truth be told, it's hard for them to afford the used cars, because the used car values have just been too high as well, because they appreciated in value over the last 12 to 15 months by about 50%.
Yeah.
So everything is becoming less and less affordable. So I see a shrinking market in the sense that there's fewer and fewer people that can actually afford to pay these prices for these vehicles.
And let's hit on it, Dad. Honda and Kia, as well as Mercedes-Benz, they were transacting last month as new cars anywhere from 6.5 to 8.7% over MSRP. That hits the nail on the head of more attainable price point cars. Honda and Kia selling at 6 to 8% above MSRP. Other end of the spectrum, Pops, Buick, Lincoln, Ram, all selling at nearly 1% below MSRP. So there are some automakers out there, some dealers that are selling below MSRP. You have to really be cognizant of which brand it is. Stellantis products, for example, are a good option there. All considered, Dad. Non-luxury vehicles, the average transaction price was nearly $44,000. That's non-luxury vehicles selling on average $1,000 over MSRP. Compare that to luxury vehicles, average transaction price last month north of $66,000. You have electric vehicles, Dad, selling for on average $67,000, and you have van prices north of $50,000 for the first time ever. One other storyline of note, hybrid powertrains increased the most of any type of vehicle. They saw an $8,453 increase in average transaction price versus 1 year ago. The market, Dad, just summarizing on the new car side, unfortunately has gotten worse. The slight good news is maybe on the used car side, we see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Thinking about getting an extended warranty? Go to joinyaa.com and check out our pricing there. There's no obligation, no spam, no robocalls. YAA for your extended warranty. I think the best way to describe the new car market at the moment, pricing-wise, is it's knuck and futz, okay? It is absolutely knuck and futz, and I keep saying that it can't continue much longer at this rate, because it keeps shrinking your customer base that can actually afford to come in and buy the vehicles. So either a recession, a war, something has to eventually impact these prices so that they will start to go down. I'm betting it's the recession.
It's a combination of factors. I can't imagine waiting another, year or two wouldn't net you out into a better situation. We've said it before, and unfortunately, I'll say it again. Now is the worst time to buy a new car. Absolutely the worst time to buy a new car. Now is the worst time to buy a car because we're in this little bit of a limbo period where the better value is kind of unclear. Maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, the better value would actually be a used car. But right now, if you can still buy a new car at MSRP, no matter how crazy that sounds, with MSRPs getting jacked up, automakers forcing subscriptions on you, etc., it's still kind of the better value.
Yes.
This is a worse place to be in. This is the worst it's been since December of last year. So continue to stay patient if you can. If you don't need to buy a car, don't buy a car. If you have to buy a car, your car got totaled, something like that, negotiate out the door price. Let us help. Stay on top of the market conditions. A little bit of good, a little bit of bad.
Seems to be what we go through every week. A little bit of good, a little bit of bad.
Thank you, Pops, as always.
Thanks, handsome.